this is gonna work. Can y'all hear me okay? All right, good evening, everybody. Let's have some fun tonight, all right? One of the things I always endeavor to do when I'm speaking is to always say, I'll be 100, I'm gonna keep it 100. So that being said, we can talk sidebar about law school and the technical stuff with respect to law, but I want to speak to particularly this night, this group of room. This is a beautiful site. It's a tremendous site. I say that because several years ago, when I too was an aspiring law student, there was no organization like this. As a matter of fact, there was no black pre-law organization, student organization on my campus at the time. And so I say that to say to Evangeline, the work that you have done in building this organization, this legacy over the number of years you've been doing it is tremendous. And before we go any further, I would like you all to turn to this magnificent lady whom I've known for a number of years and give her a tremendous round of applause. I want to thank this organization for being gracious hosts. Special thanks, like I said, to Evangeline, because this is the only way that I would ever be admitted to Harvard Law School. So thank you for extending this invitation to me on this evening. I want to congratulate all of you all who are in this room tonight, all of you who are pursuing this profession, but not only that, investing in yourselves so that you can be full participants in what I deem as a very noble profession. I say that, and I've said before, to me, law is the antechamber into any area of life. That every institution that this nation was built upon was built presumably on the rule and the basis of laws and law. So law, it being the antechamber, this conference, this gathering that we have here today, I believe is a tremendous way for you to jumpstart what I hope to be incredible careers. The study of law, to me, it is a noble endeavor. The practice of law, I will tell you, over the 18 years I've been practicing has been a privilege. But the understanding of this and the significance of law and the system of laws is a concept that I believe is absolutely mandatory, whether you become a practicing attorney or not. Why might I suggest that? Why, you might ask that? There is perhaps no group of people in this country that have experienced the enormity and the transformative power and been the beneficiaries of law as have African Americans. Actor and writer Alvin Seme once said that the black space in the photo negative is the space that gets the least amount of attention, but it's the most important because the black space in the photo negative is what allows the picture to be seen. To a degree, I believe that the black experience, the African American experience in this country is the black space in the photo snap, the photo negative of this country that allows the ideals of freedom and justice and equality to be seen. When you think about the history of the system of laws that is applied to black people in this country, you understand that the law once said that black people were to be counted as 3/5 of a person, and that was only for the sake of political apportionment. When you think upon cases like Plessy versus Ferguson that said that no black man had any rights which any white man is bound to respect. When you think about the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, Brown versus Board, and the list goes on and on and on. In all these instances, the black experience, the black space in the negative of this country, that black space is what has allowed the clarity of the true picture of those American ideals of life, liberty, and justice to truly be seen. That's a tremendous legacy that we have in this country, but it also suggests that we have a tremendous responsibility as well. So when I found myself thinking about being here with you all tonight and what you all might like to hear from somebody like me who once was in your position, I thought about where I was at this time. And so Evangeline suggested I share my journey and my experience with you. And I thought back to my junior year of college, which was the year in which I affirmatively decided that I was going to go to law school. Now, many people would say they knew I was headed anyway because I had a liberal arts degree. That may be true. People would often ask what I was going to do with an African American studies and history degree. And I didn't know at the time, but in the course of one of my classes, it was a class on rhetoric and race, I was drawn to this poem by this author, Dudley Randall, who really captured the historic debate, these two dueling schools of ideologies between Booker T. Washington and a man who is no stranger here, who walked these hallowed halls, Harvard-trained sociologist and activist, William Edward Burghardt Du Bois. And the poem was called Booker T and WB, and I read that poem my junior year. And I remembered the significance and how it resonated with me. And the poem goes like this. It says, "It seems to me," said Booker T, "it shows a mighty lot of cheek to study chemistry and Greek when Mr. Charlie needs a hand to hold the cotton on his land. And when Miss Ann looks for a cook, why stick your nose inside a book? I don't agree," said W.E.B. "If I should have the drive to seek knowledge of chemistry or Greek, I'll do it. Charles and Miss can look another place for a hand and cook. Some men rejoice in skill of hand, and some in cultivating land, but there are others who maintain the right to cultivate the brain." "I disagree," said Booker T. I don't agree," said Booker T. "All you folks have missed the boat who shout about the right to vote and spend vain days and sleepless nights in uproar over civil rights. Just keep your mouth shut, do not grouse, but work and save and buy a house." "I don't agree," said W.E.B. "For what can property avail if dignity and justice fail? Unless you help to make the laws, they'll steal your house with trumped up claws. A rope's as tight, a fire's as hot, no matter how much cash you've got. Speak soft and try your little plan, but as for me, I'll be a man." "It seems to me," said Booker T. "I don't agree," said W.E.B. Now that's how that poem ended, but something about those words really lit a fire in me. And it really ignited my passion for really taking on and understanding what it meant to be a part of this profession, be a part of this, what I call this noble profession. And if I was honest with you, I could tell you that my career up to this point has been a mix of both trials and triumphs, successes and failures. And if I'm even more honest, I would tell you that there's something strangely ironic about me being asked to stand here with you tonight to share with you about my career when I truly feel that I am still in a process of developing and growing in my own career. But what I did want to do is impart on you 3 points that I want to leave you with that were captured by the words of this poem, but were reinforced in me by my parents. My first thought is to stand up and speak up. Now, if you are going to be a part of this profession, that's one of the first things that you're going to have to learn. I don't mean standing up and speaking up just in the courtroom. but I mean standing up and speaking up in life. My mother would always tell me that nothing beats a failure but a try. But if you don't try, you have already failed. And I took those words to heart when I embarked on my education at the University of Texas. And anybody knows, by show of hands, who is from the South? All right, now there's the South and then there's Texas, okay? There is the South and then there's Texas. I'll give you just a point of reference. When I was in law school, in my undergrad, in my first couple of years in law school, I worked for the state NAACP, a man by the name of Gary Bledsoe, who was the president of the state NAACP. And Gary was a civil rights attorney who took me under his wing and really helped to cultivate and shape my understanding of law, not only in theory, but in practice as well. Any of you all know James Byrd Jr. Have you heard that story? James Byrd Jr. was a black man who was dragged to death behind a pickup truck in East Texas. They found his body decapitated, head severed completely from his body after being dragged behind a pickup truck by some white nationalists. Now, that was 20-something years ago, but you would be remiss if you didn't make the connection between what happened 20 years ago and the current political environment that we're in right now. It was alluded to earlier, but so that when I said that Texas, there's Texas and then there's the South, that's the backdrop against which I went to law school. That 1998 was my first semester, my fall semester in law school, and so I went to law school after having spent a summer working with Gary on the civil and criminal components of this case. And to know Texas, to know the University of Texas, is to know why I was so passionate about even going to law school in the first place. And I want to tell you a little bit about it. I raised, by show of hand again, which of y'all are from the South again? Can y'all call out some states for me? Just Louisiana, Alabama? Okay. All right. So we got the dirty South in here tonight. So I want to paint the picture for you. The University of Texas campus recently made headlines. It's probably maybe sometime late last year about the removal of the Confederate statues from its campus. There's an area of campus that was known as a six-pack. It was adorned by 3 statues on each side, each of them bearing the likeness of Confederate war heroes, whose heads were all turned facing left, facing the same direction where the university's main building was facing, the south, facing the same direction which the capital, Texas, was facing, south. Does anyone know why those buildings were built facing the south? They're built facing the south to pledge their steadfast allegiance to the Southern Confederacy, which is why all those heads were turned facing south. Now, when I got to campus, I thought, you know what, this is a little bit too much for me. I cannot be a black man walking around this campus with these remnants of this era in. So what I did was started to work and collaborate with a group of students who said, you know what, if we are going to change this campus, then we're going to have to be the change that we want to see. So we started working on a committee to raise funds and build another statue on that campus, something that would be much more representative of a campus that would be welcoming to people like me. 5 short years later, during my first year of law school, we unveiled on campus only the second statue in this country on the college campus of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to combat the images of those racist Confederate persons that we saw in the six-pack. This was to me standing up and speaking up, even before I had stepped foot on campus at the University of Texas, the School of Law. But you have to understand the environment in which we did that in was one in which racial hostility and racial animus ruled the day. How many of you all have ever heard of a case called Hopwood versus Texas? Hopwood versus Texas was a case that I was involved in both as an undergraduate student and as a law student. Hopwood versus Texas was a case that was ruled on by the Fifth Circuit that effectively ended affirmative action programs at the University of Texas for all public and state schools in the state of Texas. Now, it was applied to schools in the Fifth Circuit, both in Louisiana and Mississippi. Those states were opted out, but Texas was still saddled by the remnants of this particular case. We filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court, and I also testified in the Grutter versus Bollinger case. That was a case at my wife's alma mater, University of Michigan, whose affirmative action programs have been challenged as well. My point in sharing this with you is to let you know that my advocacy and my interest and my passion for the law and standing up and speaking up started well before I'd even taken my first law school exam or even sat down for my cursory class in constitutional law. And I share that with you all to let you know that my advocacy didn't stop there, because a few short years later, the University of Texas would be met by another challenge, a case called Fisher versus Texas. Have y'all ever heard of Abigail Fisher? Yeah, Abigail Fisher sued the University of Texas because she conflated merit with entitlement. Abigail Fisher sued the university claiming and alleging that her rightful place in the entering freshman class at the University of Texas had been taken up by black and brown students. Now, what that case will not tell you is that Abigail Fisher challenged the admission of 47 students that she believed had lower scores, lower test scores, lower LSAT scores, and lower grades and credentials than she did. What the case won't tell you was that only 5 of those 47 students were black or Latino. The other 42 were Anglo students. Now, if I were a judge in that case, I would have kicked her out for not having the requisite math skills to understand that 42 is greater than 5. Now, effectively what that case was about was not suggesting that there were 47 students who had lower scores than her, but it was about these 5 black and brown students that she felt didn't deserve to be there only because she felt like she had a birthright to be there in their place. The Dallas Morning News called me up and asked if I would write an op-ed on that. I was so hot, I wrote that thing in 30 minutes. Start to finish, 30 minutes, it hit the presses, and it was game over. I had to speak my piece and let them know that as a person who was in the second entering class after Hopwood, a class of 500 students that had only 6 African-American students, we had gone full circle 50 years later after integration of the University of Texas Law School, when Heman Sweat was the first to admit it. 50 years later, found ourselves living this same story, this same movie, this same tragic movie of entitlement and misplaced ideas of merit all over again. So I suggest to you, stand up and speak up, but don't wait until you have applied to law school or have sat down for your first law school exam. Start now, start where you are. Any instances of injustice, any things that you feel kind of bear down on these notions of life, liberty, and justice, stand up and speak up. You have a responsibility, if you're going to be a part of this profession, to start being an advocate, and that advocacy can start right now. The second thing I want to share with you is this idea of not only standing up and speaking up, but sacrifice. And understand that if you're going to be a productive member of this profession, then you need to understand that you need to use your gifts, sacrifice sometimes yourself, and use your gifts to benefit others. Anything, and as alluded to you earlier about the legacy that black people particularly have with systems and law systems, we know that all those came at incredible sacrifice, tremendous sacrifice on the part of those who led that. You've got to have some skin in the game. One of my biggest frustrations when I was a student on campus, and I was talking to you about building these statues and dealing with these issues of racial tensions, the first thing that the administrators always want to do would be to start a committee. Problems would happen. Let's start a committee. There's some bleach balloons thrown at black students on West Campus. Let's start a committee. Marlen, we know you're not particularly satisfied about these Confederate statues. Let's start a committee. I got so frustrated, I stood up to them one day and I said, you know what? God so loved the world that he didn't send a committee to save it. You got to understand, committees are where ideas go to die. So in order to be an agent or an instrument of change, you've got to be willing to sacrifice. I often tell a story. When I was at my former firm, Reed Smith, it's an international law firm, about 1,800 lawyers around the globe. And for any of y'all who are wondering what it's like to be a partner in a big law firm, I was telling Jordan earlier, I said, it's people think that when you make partner, things become easy. It's easy street. Everything's gravy. And I tell them, no, that partner, when you're a partner, you have the same amount of work. It's just because you have that P behind your name, you get a sharper shovel to dig with. So I don't want any of you all to have any misconstrued notions about what it means to be a partner in a major law firm. But back to this idea of sacrifice, I want you to understand that my being in that role was not satisfactory for me. And you might ask why. It's because when I looked around the room, there weren't enough of me in the room. You see, I'm not one of those ones who's satisfied being the only one in the room. Truth be told, you're going to run into some of those in this profession. But I would caution you all to not be one of those. So back to this idea of sacrifice. So at this firm, they asked me to serve as a hiring partner. And that was a role in which I cherished tremendously, because when you're a hiring partner, you get to make decisions. When you're a hiring partner, you get a seat at the table. You get to control, you get to have a say-so in who comes in and who goes out of that firm. And so it wasn't a responsibility I took lightly. As a matter of fact, I used it as an idea and platform for empowerment, and not for myself, but for people like you that are sitting in this room. Because like I said, I got tired of being the only one. And which brings me to this point about sacrifice, because I can remember one day, it was on an email chain, and my wife worked at the same firm for a while, so she was in a different office. She would tell you that I was not one to hold my tongue very well. And so what had happened was, we had this, when you say, I tell y'all, when you're in a hiring partner, you get a seat at the table. That means you're part of the firm's management, right? So this management email went out, and our chief diversity officer, John Eno, was on the email, and we were talking about, the upcoming fall calendar year and the interviewing season at law schools. And as a hiring partner, you're charged with going out and identifying law schools that you're going to interview at. And not only that, but you get the resumes in advance of students, and you can cull through and pick through the very students that you want to interview. There's a tremendous amount of power in that, right? And so on this email chain, we were talking about the different schools, and I made the point that since we were in Houston, that, and because you asked me to serve in this role, we're going to do things a little bit different. You see, Texas Southern University, which is one of the preeminent HBCU law schools in this country, is right there in Houston, Texas. It's in our backyard, but for some reason, some of my law partners and some of my colleagues did not want to interview at Texas Southern. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I thought, why is it that this group of homogenous men, why would they not want to interview at Texas Southern? And so one of them responded back to my email when I suggested we interview there. He said that I don't think we should interview there because that school is not as qualified as the others. And that word came qualified, and that's anybody who knows me knows I got some trigger words. Qualified in this context was one of those trigger words. He said that Texas Southern wasn't, the students there weren't very qualified. And so I played dumb. I said, well, what do you, mind you, this is still firm-wide group email. I said, what do you mean qualified? He said, well, that school is not ranked as high as some of the schools that I think a firm of this stature that we should be interviewing at. Okay, I said, well, I'll tell you what, unbeknownst to me, I'm emailing a man who was 2 floors down in my same building. I said, I tell you what, if y'all don't want me to interview at Texas Southern, then we're not going to go to South Texas School of Law either, because they're ranked in the same tier. And if you're telling me that the students at Texas Southern aren't qualified, then that means just by deductive reason that the students at South Texas aren't qualified. Then he clapped back. He said, oh, no. South Texas, you see, that was his alma mater. South Texas School of Law is okay. I said, I'll be down in about 5 minutes. Mind you, this is still reply all firm email. I said, I'll be down in about 5 minutes. Now, at this point, I was sure that I had lost my damn job. When I put into context, the managing partner, the global managing partner who sat in Washington, D.C., was on this email. Every major department head was on this email, and me and this guy going back and forth. So I was certain that after I had my say with this man, I was going to have to come back and box up my office, but I wasn't going to go out like that. So I had to go down and tell him about the transitive properties and things of that nature, that if, the schools here and the schools here, they're equal in my eyes. And so if we're not going to go here, then we're not going to go here. And since I'm hiring partner, I get to make that decision. I had to pull rank since they gave me the title. So, but what I want you to know, about this decision, what I want you to know is when I got back to my office, when I was certain that me speaking up was going to cost me my job, I got a phone call from one of the members of the firm's management. And at this point, I was bracing for it, y'all. I said, hello? Trying to act, put my professional voice on there. Hello? So she said, hi, Marlen, this is Casey. Casey was on the firm's management team. I said, good afternoon, Casey, how you doing? She said, well, that was a very lively discussion that you had. I said, well, yeah, some things were said, but, and so we talked, and she said, well, we see that you have a passion for this. And I said, well, yes, I do, but, y'all knew this when you hired me, so this should come as no surprise to you. And I told her about the fact that, I'm a person who has to go live in this community and speak and work with these students. And as hiring partner, I could not go into this school and give these lectures and workshops on how to interview and how to be a successful attorney. And by the way, my firm won't hire you because we don't think you're qualified. I said, how do you think that makes me feel as a person that works and has, a role not only in this firm, but a responsibility to this community which I serve? And she said, I understand that. She said, well, I tell you what, we're going to figure out how to address that, and we'll get back to you. A week later, the firm gave me a call back and said, you know what, we want to offer you a role within the firm. We want to make you over our diversity recruiting. We understand that you have a passion for it, and we want to put you in a position to help us change some things. And so as a result of standing up and speaking up, Reed Smith made me the firm's first executive director for diversity recruiting, a role which I had for a full year and used to benefit students who look just like you. So understand but this role came as sacrifice for me, because I had to give up part of my practice to make sure that the pipeline to diversity and the pipeline looked and included more people like me, and being the person who's the first in my family, just like you, to graduate from college and the first to go to law school. I felt a tremendous responsibility to make sure that I was not going to be the last, not just from my family, but from my community. And so that's why giving up my practice to make sure that I could have more people that look like you in my law firm was not a tough decision to make at all. So understand that if you're going to be a part of this profession, there's going to come a time where you need to sacrifice, and sometimes that sacrifice comes at your own expense. Now, the last thing I want to leave you with is this notion of struggle. And when I throw the word struggle out, some people cringe, and understand that I know, like, we it seems like it's antithetical to going to law school, right? Because you think, I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to make some money, and I'm going to live a life that I never lived, and I'm going to be able to give my family and my kids things I never had. But I want you to understand that this profession and our responsibility to this profession is so much greater than the material gains and the material things that we think that we can gain from it. But in order to get there, you're going to have to become comfortable with this idea of struggle. Now, understand this: struggles will come and struggles will go, but my mother always told me that struggles will also grow. They will make you grow. What do you mean by that? My mother would always tell me, she said, "Marlen, look at a caterpillar." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, when a caterpillar is maturing, it goes into a cocoon." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, in the process, when it's a cocoon, it's transforming, it's growing, it's changing." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, how does a caterpillar get out of the cocoon?" And I said, "Well, you can break." She said, "No, you cannot break the cocoon." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because the struggle is a part of the growth process for that caterpillar. In order for that caterpillar to become a butterfly, it's got to learn how to break out of its own cocoon. Because if you break it out for them, they won't learn to fly. But something about the struggle process strengthens its wings. And something about making that first crack makes that second crack is possible. And if that second crack becomes possible, that big chunk becomes even more possible. And after that, they can break through everything that constrained them, and that through that process, their wings build up strength. And it's that strength through that struggle that allows them to fly. So understand that being a part of this profession, yes, you are going to struggle, but understand that that struggle is going to bring about some growth. Now, I will tell you this, and this is one of the things I love to tell, because when I was coming up and working my way towards, I didn't even know that I had it in me to be a law firm partner. But there was a man in my firm who saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And the story to me is beautiful because he did not look like me. And that's one thing I will leave you with. Your allies are going to be just as important as the people in this room, because sometimes your mentors aren't always going to look like you. This man, Bert Vergay, and I shared a background that was similar and dissimilar. We were both from Arkansas. I was born and raised the first few years of my life in Little Rock. Bert was from Fort Smith. Anybody know anything about Fort Smith? It was the home one time of the Klan. And so I'm sharing that with you to let you know just the optics of building this up. Bert Vergay was a man from small town Arkansas. I was from Little Rock. Bert Vergay went to University of Texas Law School. I went to University of Texas Law School. Bert Vergay was a former high school athlete. I was an athlete. And so Bert found that something, that likeness in me that he saw in himself. And Bert took me under his wing. Now, the thing you should know about Bert was Bert had a reputation for being the firm's hard ass. Yeah, Bert would make people cry, and Bert would make people quit. And I say that because many associates, when I got to the firm, said, "You know what, you can work with anybody, but if you work with that man, I guarantee you'll be quitting here in 2 years." But I took it as a challenge because remember what I said, that the struggle brings about growth. And working for one of the people who had the reputation for being one of the toughest, the Bible says that iron sharpens iron. And working for somebody who had a reputation for tough, guess what? It made me tough. Working for someone who had a reputation for being someone who was brilliant, you know what? I thought it made me even more brilliant. Working for somebody who had tenacity gave me tenacity. And I say that to suggest that working with this man wasn't always easy. But working with this man is what equipped me with the tools to, when it became time to be promoted, they said, "You know what? If this man can survive working with Bert, he can survive anything." And as a result of working with someone who had a reputation for being the firm's hard ass, it gave me a reputation for being somebody who could conquer anything, even the firm's hard ass. And so I say that to suggest that working through struggle will bring about, and don't shy away from struggle. As I take my seat, I want to share with you something is a story that was imparted upon me when I was a kid. Now, I mentioned that I was born in Arkansas, so y'all will have to forgive me, because if you know anything about country folk, every story we tell has something to do with some type of animal. It's usually a farm animal. So when I was a kid, somebody told me the story of the chicken and an eagle. And it goes like this. It says there was an eagle one day that had lost an egg, and the little mother hen came along and she found this eagle egg, and she took it home and she sat on it with all the loving patience of an incipient mother. And on the first day of this eagle's emergence into this world, he was by every sense, by every measurement, and by every estimation, an eagle. He was an eagle historically, he was an eagle genealogically, he was an eagle physiologically, and an eagle anatomically. But you see, he was born in chicken circumstances, and he grew up in a chicken environment. He grew up playing chicken games and dreaming chicken dreams, walking chicken walk and talking chicken talk. His greatest ambition in life, when he went down to the chicken high school with his interview with the counselor, when he asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, he said he wanted to hop, skip, and jump up on the nearest fence post and cock-a-doodle-doo for day like he saw the roosters do. Now, the chickens that he lived amongst waged psychological warfare against this lost young bird, because they said to themselves, if he ever finds out who he really is, we're in trouble. So they began to make fun of him and mock him. They made fun of his big, strong eagle beak because they had little bitty chicken lips. And they made fun of his big, strong eagle talons because they had little bitty, pathetic chicken feet. And this little chicken began to hang his head in shame, and he even thought about having cosmetic surgery and have his beak cut off so he could look more like the chickens. Well, one day when this little eagle was playing in the barnyard, he saw this great shadow float over the ground like some great ships float over the watery bosoms of life's oceans. And for the first time in his life, he looked up higher than the chicken coop. He looked up higher than the fence post, higher than the tree line. And he saw framed against the majestic, sun-drenched afternoon sky, the majestic form of an adult eagle in full flight with all the rhythm and power and majesty of that king of the air. And that little lost bird's mind was blown. And he thought to himself, I really wish I could be like that. But then he remembered how in the chicken yard they had made fun of him, told him he would never be anything, and he again hung his head in shame. But the adult eagle perceived the dilemma of that lost young bird, and so he swooped down from his stratospheric heights, and he said to him in so many words, Jordan, he said, boy, you ain't no chicken, you're an eagle. Your eagle eyes were not meant to be limited to the narrow confines of this barnyard, but to seek out the distant horizons of your own unfulfilled potential. He said, boy, you ain't no chicken. You're an eagle. Your eagle talons were not meant to grub and scrub along the ground for worms and caterpillars, but to grab the craggy sides of life's mountains of achievements. He said, boy, spread your wings to be caught in the wafting winds of your own immeasurable genius. And so as I take my seat tonight and I look upon this beautiful sea of people, I want to let y'all know that you are not a group of chickens. You are a group of eagles. So even if you go to some chicken schools, even if you have some chicken professors, even if you work on some chicken jobs, under some chicken supervisor, being given chicken assignments and making chicken money, don't do chicken work and don't bring home chicken grades, because you are all a group of eagles. God bless you, and thank you all for letting me have this time with you today.